I first started staying in Karachi was at the age of 8, when I was left with my grandmother for schooling purposes. Because by that time my father was in Iran and they had no English medium schools in Iran. We came to this house when I was 14 years of age. So from 14 years of age till today, which is 75 years ahead, I'm in this house. The neighborhood was first started in about 1906. Cincinnatius Diablo was a sort of leader in a group of men who got the idea of developing this area. That's why it was called Cincinnatius Town. And many of the streets bore the names of among the leaders of these men. There's Pedro de Souza Road, Brito Road, De Cruz Road. There's a Sequeira Street. You see, these are all Goan names. The building rules were laid down by the government, which was the British government. So you were only allowed to build, I think it was about on 1/3 of your plot. And those rules were adhered to very firmly, because it was a government that didn't allow infringements of laws. During the war years, we saw many soldiers. We used to call them Tommies, of course. The war wounded, particularly on the Eastern Front, that is in Burma, Singapore, that side, they all used to be brought here to the British military hospital. Now, they used to come in by the shipload, and they wanted volunteers to accompany the wounded in the ambulances. So many of us young girls would go in groups of 4 or 5 and wander in the wards, talk to them, write a letter for them, play a game, you know. And then when they got better, we even used to play badminton. We had a lovely big hall. They used to exercise their injured limbs and learn to use them again, like that. There was also a group of men who were interested in theatricals. 1 or 2 of the Gilbert and Sullivan operas that were done with Tommies taking part, these soldiers. I remember HMS Pinafore being done at the Palace Cinema. It had a nice stage and all that. The Mikado was done in the KGA. I think those were the 2 main ones that we did with them. In the operettas, there were 2 girls. Winnie Lobo, who had a very good voice, who was trained. She went to England and she got trained there. And there was another one with a natural voice, Phyllis Rodrigues, a really beautiful voice. St. Joseph's Convent has a large play shed, tiled and covered over and all that. So they used to have periodically, on a Saturday afternoon, they would have what they called tea dances. That means a bunch of soldiers would come in and there would be a group of girls. So they passed the evening dancing. So like that we got to know some. And if I'm not mistaken, 1 or 2 romances also came up at that time between them and the Goan girls, or girls from here. They went and they took their wives with them. The war changed us a lot. From being a self-contained community with not much desire to go out, to work, the war made it necessary for people to work. The girls first now started going into the WACs, these organizations, and then gradually more and more women went to work. Prices rose, things were difficult. So that began the shift away from the very homely life that we lived before. It was taken for granted that the police would make money on the side, you know. And in a way, I didn't blame them. Because For the amount of responsibility and the opportunity that they had, their salaries were miserable. Even in those days when money had value, the lower ranks were compelled to accept illegal money because the higher-ups would demand it of them. But one thing which I always look back at with great, I don't know if you would say pride, but certainly satisfaction. Nobody ever made a demand on my husband. None of the higher-ups, even when he was a sub-inspector and then a rose inspector, so on, because they knew that he was honest. They accepted that fact, so they never asked him for anything. And he was able to maintain that. Then he was awarded the Pakistan Police Medal. Rather, I was an investiture for that. He was very anxious to marry me. I wasn't certain that I was going to marry him. But I know one thing. My mother, after all, I was the eldest of 4 girls. And it's a question of settling the 4 girls. So my mother and, not my father, he never said anything, but she would tell me, what about this one, what about that one, people whom we knew, you know. And I said, no, no, no. But finally, when I made up my mind, it was her birthday, I remember, in July, the 19th of July. And when I wished her, I said, you know, Mommy, I've decided to marry so-and-so. Oh, she said, that's the best birthday present you could give me. In those days, the weddings were held during the day, usually on a Sunday. So the church ceremony was at 10 o'clock in the morning, and after that, we adjourned to the hall, and that reception went on till about 4 in the afternoon or something like that, with dancing and the meal served and all that sort of thing. My wedding dress was made by a tailor in the house. In those days, we could get the tailors. We gave them everything they required. And it was very difficult to get material because, you know, it was the war years. There was a dearth of things, particularly the things that we imported from the West. So at imports, we used to get lots of foreign imports, but the imports were down because the factories weren't working. I remember my husband sending a constable or whoever he had, constable, daily to the port to see if anything had come in. And finally, they got me a good piece of silk, but that was all. Compared to the other elaborate wedding gowns that I've seen, you know, with lace and tulle and all sorts of things. Mine was a very simple one. It had to be, because there was nothing better. There was a time when we became very conscious of independence. You know, Gandhi's movements had started then. The fight for the struggle for independence. What we felt was that textiles, which could have been made in what was India then, the whole of India, if the British had let us develop, everything was being sent to them as raw material and was coming back to us. The day that the Kite died, it really is a great pity. But I think it would have made a great difference if he'd lived a little longer and been able to establish his own ideas and for Pakistan.